All right, hi everyone. So I just wanted to say I appreciate you all for coming, especially because it's a Sunday and I know summer break started for some people. So it's really just nice to have people take the time out of your day to learn more about the topic that I'll be speaking about today, which is mental health in schools and taking a multidimensional view of it. So I'll briefly introduce myself first and my involvement with neolth. So I'm Aliza, and I've served in various roles for NEO throughout the years. So I did serve as a student ambassador, and I still do serve in that role. Now I lead the Outreach to School subcommittee, and I've also done various internships with outreach and engagement. So it's just been really cool to kind of like collaborate with other students, not only nationally, but internationally as well, and get to know how our different perspectives and backgrounds can really just merge together in order to make even more of an impact in the student mental health movement. So yeah, I just think it's really fascinating to be able to work with not just my current skills, but with other people as well to expand the movement even more, especially with such an impact-oriented company. So yeah, I'll be going more into the different views of mental health in schools through the different slides that I prepared. And yeah, so we can get started on that. So first I wanted to talk about, as the title basically implies, the intersection of mental health and education. So what I've noticed, and what many of my peers have also noticed, is that there's a very direct relationship between mental health and education. Like, it kind of impacts each other in some way. So what I mean by that is that it tends to follow like very similar trends, since education is considered a very big factor in one's lifestyle, especially for young people today. So in many of my classmates, I've kind of seen that a declining like general mental health state can also tend to lead to decreased performance in classes, and decreased performance in classes can also have a similar relationship in affecting one's mental health. And that can be for a variety of reasons, including the fact that some students may tend to quantify their worth through their education. So things like their grades, they may see that if they get a higher grade, then they may feel more personally fulfilled. But if they get a lower grade, then they may not really feel as much that way. So yeah, that's kind of how I see it, and the very basic terms that I could probably explain it in. And for the second point, here we have that educational attainment is also tied to upward mobility. And this is a really big determining factor of things like socioeconomic status and the ability to afford a more enriching lifestyle. So as I kind of touched upon, that is another way that mental health and education are directly correlated with each other, just because people with a higher level of education can probably go on to attain more like fulfilling jobs that they could use to really just like gain more access to the different resources that they may need, or in order to fulfill like other aspects of their lifestyle that do positively impact their wellness. And mental health also has an internal and external effects and other factors. It also has a role in developing confidence, not just academically, but in general, as well as one's well-being. So things like jobs and like finances, as I mentioned earlier, can also have a really big impact on not just mental health, but wellness in general. So on the chart over here, I kind of have just like a basic rundown of like different factors of how mental health is impacted. So some of these like sociocultural forces can also include things like family, religion, as I said, education, health, recreation, language, and country of origin. And I also find that besides education itself, these other influences that it's pointing to all directly correlate with education as well. So as you can see, it's very multifaceted, and it does intersect a lot with each other. So what I also wanted to touch upon here, since we're talking about mental health in schools, is including Generation Z in the discussion. And as someone that's been in just the general like advocacy field for a couple of years, I've really noticed the importance of being able to make sure that all young people are represented in the discussion, because I've commonly seen that it may be due to like our age that a lot of people do tend to overlook us. They may think that young people are inexperienced or just simply incompetent because of our age. They may think that we're too young to even have a say in these things. But I generally think that that isn't the case. That is for a lot of reasons, but I'll also provide some relevant statistics down here about mental health in young people. So it was reported that over 9 in 10 Generation Z members have reported having a negative mental health experience at least once, which is alarming because that is the greatest majority, or the greater majority of the Gen Z population. And it was also seen that an estimated 42% of Gen Z members also have at least one mental health condition. And I honestly think that this statistic is lower than what it actually is, simply because some mental health conditions may not be diagnosed yet, or some people may not just be reporting it at that time. And as for the last point here, we have that more than half of surveyed Generation Z members, I believe the statistic was around 70%, they strongly feel that their mental health is personally an area of great improvement to them. And I feel like this really makes sense because mental health is very interconnected with a lot of different aspects of your lifestyle. And as we all know, it can affect things like your physical health, your social relationships, your emotions as well. So really just making sure that all of those are in regulation is really crucial as well. So the question I asked here under the heading is, why should our young generation have a seat at the table when it comes to mental health, and especially mental health in schools? So one, I said that it really just increases DEI, or diversity, equity, and inclusion in this space. Again, since we want to make sure that all demographics are represented, making sure that young people have a voice is really important. And it just really reassures everyone that all of their voices are being heard, all of their input is valued and being shared, and that their backgrounds always matter. The second one we have here is that it really just helps to validate the experiences and struggles of young people. So as I said earlier, a lot of people do tend to think that because of Gen Z's relatively younger age, we may be too inexperienced, or we don't have the right background or knowledge in mind. But again, that isn't the case. And by including more Gen Z members in the discussion, we can help to really push that fact that our input is always valuable no matter what, and that our backgrounds can be an asset in any conversation, and especially including mental health, since it really does affect us significantly today. For the third reason, I just listed that it really just helps to boost productivity among movements and the workforce, because as I said, having more diverse and more of a variety of perspectives really just helps to build that collaboration and coordination among the workspace. By sharing all of these ideas, we can make sure that, again, everyone's background and concerns are being accounted for, which ultimately helps to build a stronger workforce. And for the fourth one here, I said that it definitely helps to empower more individuals to broaden the discussion, because I feel that if even one member of Gen Z, even if one voice is being heard, that can definitely accelerate itself into more people wanting to share their stories voluntarily. They feel like they don't have to restrict themselves. They can feel free to share out according to what feels the most comfortable for them. So I definitely think that helps to boost productivity, vulnerability, and transparency in that way. So I actually wanted to touch upon some student accounts and some perspectives when it came to the mental health discussion in not only just their schools, but probably observations of other schools and other peers that they may have talked to. So we consulted some of our student ambassadors for this, and one of them said that I think schools should prioritize mental health services. When it comes down to problems that occur in a school setting, a lot of it can be counteracted or helped by counselors, not just academic counselors, but administrators who are trained in specifically teen mental health services. And once more of these services are implemented, they believe that fights, school shootings, and rebellious actions will go down significantly. And I wanted to point out that last statement just to to emphasize that mental health, education, and other factors are all interconnected with each other. So it's really important that we broaden this discussion and bring more of these factors to light. As this ambassador pointed out, more mental health services definitely need to be implemented in the school setting. We need more counselors and more mental health professionals in these settings to be more cognizant of young people's needs and make sure that we're accommodating those resources to them accordingly. So as for our second student account, they also said that schools should have a range of mental health services to support students' well-being, including school-based mental health professionals, prevention and early intervention programs, peer support programs, mental health education, and referral and coordination with community mental health services when necessary. And I also do think that this is a really crucial statement that they pointed out, because they didn't just refer to the school level, but the community level as well. And I think community partnerships are also a very crucial factor that we could incorporate into school mental health services today, which I'll also touch upon in a future slide. So yeah, it's pretty related to the first quote that I presented, in that they mentioned that more of a variety of mental health services should be provided to our student bodies. And I really love that this student also pointed out the need for competent professionals and even early intervention programs, which I'll also touch more upon in a future slide. So as for our last account, the student said that it's important for schools to have mental health assessments of students at school on a regular basis in order to keep track of students' mental health and facilitate mental health counseling and other services accordingly. So a theme that I really just pointed out and noticed as I was reading through all of these accounts is that there's definitely a need for more diverse and accommodative student services that they can really just make use of. And there needs to be more of a safe space that counselors and other trained professionals can provide for students at schools, especially considering that schools should preferably be seen as a safe and fostering space for students to thrive in. But of course, that can't be achieved unless we pay more attention to what students truly need in their mental health demands. So I wanted to talk about some common mental health factors in students. And of course, this isn't a comprehensive list since I only have 4 listed here. And as I noted on the side, it's important to note that one's identity and personal circumstances can affect one's mental health differently. So really just how the 4 factors that I have listed on the side, how they respond to these factors or how those factors individually affect them. Identity and one's circumstances are also defined differently from person to person. They are by no means identical to each other in any way. Because one's background and lived experiences obviously have so much impact on a person, and they are perceived in different ways. And for the second point here, I did say again that there is no single way that an individual will respond to it or how it will affect them. And it's important to note that, especially in school mental health, it's not a black and white matter. It's more of a continuum. So we wouldn't be saying that one's mental health is affected by, let's say, their by peer pressure or isn't affected by peer pressure at all. It's kind of like a spectrum. It could affect them to some extent, but maybe not as much as others, or it could be more than others. So first off, we have here work-life balance, or work life and academics. So for a lot of students, in an attempt to perform at the highest standard possible, whether that's just for the expectations they set for themselves or for others' expectations, such as their parents, their teachers, or even their friends, students may tend to overextend themselves beyond their mental, physical, and emotional bandwidth. They may think that they truly need to fulfill that for others, but they may just ignore the distress and the mental toll that it may be taking on them. So this would commonly lead to periods of burnout and similar symptoms such as depression, questioning one's worth, and other physical symptoms that can actually manifest as a result of that. So as for peer pressure, of course, we do see this in a lot of schools even today. And this is partly because a lot of these students are in various transitional stages. So individuals may resort to different behaviors and various actions that their peers may want to adopt in order to fit in, since having that sense of social identity is a very crucial aspect that a lot of students want to maintain at this time. So this having all of this peer pressure in schools, it can lead to a lot of different internal conflicts within students, such as determining what is right to them versus what is wrong to them, or what they feel is the best option for them. And yeah, this could be a really big factor in how they see their identity and how they want to define it. And because of all of these internal conflicts and making all of these decisions between themselves and their peers, they may have it's also important for them to realize that all of these factors within peer pressure have a significant weight in their inner confidence, their self-esteem, and their decision-making. Are they able to securely make these decisions for themselves, or do they think that they have the capacity to even make these decisions, or should they eventually just resort and give in to what they're being pressured to do? So the third one I have here is imposter syndrome, which I feel has gained a lot of traction as a term in the past few years. And it's generally characterized by feelings of being an imposter. So an individual or just a student may feel like they're undeserving of the successes that have been given to them, regardless of the amount of effort that they put in. And they may feel like they don't deserve the support that they're getting or like the accomplishments that they've been receiving. And because of this, a lot of students may start to question their true inner worth and their abilities as well. They may feel like they're not actually deserving of it, or that they're actually falling short, like they don't know really how to navigate the situation. And because of this, students can feel that they are not performing as much as they should be. They're not performing at like a higher level as they should be compared to their peers. And they may also be anxious to start tasks because they feel like it's not going to be done at the best performance they can. It's not going to meet the expectations of themselves or others, and a lot of various reasons. And the last one I have here is parental pressures. So a lot of students do feel a lot of pressure to succeed and meet very high goals that their family or specifically their parents put onto them. And we can often see this in a lot of students nowadays, and that it kind of like translates over to how they start to perceive themselves. So because of like the immense pressures that may be put on them by their parents, they may also start to adopt those own pressures towards themselves. And this can lead to a lot of different detrimental effects, such as if they fall short of their goal, then the effects often revolve around being too critical of oneself. They may start to like tell themselves that like they are not like deserving or they're not good enough, even if they make a small mistake. And a lot of students do tend to be very unforgiving towards themselves, even if they don't really treat others that way. So yeah, this is really just like an overview of some factors that we see in students, but of course this isn't the most comprehensive list because each student is different in their background and in what affects them. So I also wanted to mention that academics itself is also a huge factor in mental health in students today. And yeah, as I stated in this sentence here, as one's mental health and performance in schools can be rooted in these circumstances, their academics and their education can also have just an equal weight in affecting their mental wellness as well. And I really just wanted to emphasize that in today's society, things like hustle culture often promotes a lot of damaging ideals, such as pushing one's boundaries, overextending oneself, working past hours. And this could be really bad when deciding how one wants to balance their lifestyle, their desires, their actual needs, and just their well-being as a whole. So these are 3 factors that I listed here that are often tied to academics being that accelerator for declining mental health. So the first one I have here is perfectionism. And we can often see this in students when they have like this really strong desire to have everything that they accomplish and finish without any flaws whatsoever. And they may start to think that these errors are just simply unacceptable. And this causes them great distress, even if they make the smallest of mistakes. And obviously we can realize that this is a very unrealistic standard that anyone would be held up to. And it can result in a student going to great lengths just to prove their abilities. And again, as I said, it does set unrealistic and unreasonable standards for themselves, because that level of standards just simply cannot be attained. As for comparison, so a lot of peers, as I've observed, and from even my personal experiences, we've often used like other peers as a measure for our own personal success, rather than realizing our own personal qualities and knowing that our worth is rooted in ourselves and our self-esteem and our love and appreciation for ourselves. And because we compare ourselves to our peers, a lot of students do use this to determine if they meet that like cookie cutter definition of being successful or not. So for example, even if like a student performs better on a test, then a student may automatically equate themselves to being lesser than that person, being not as smart, being like not deserving, or just not being like as skilled as that peer that got a higher grade or just did generally better at something. And I feel like students definitely need to realize that they have individual benchmarks and progress, and they shouldn't be using other individuals as that benchmark for how they should be performing. Everyone goes at their own pace, which is definitely a value that a lot of students need to realize. And the last one I have here is that, again, as I said earlier, a lot of students do quantify their worth through their grades. And a lot of the times this is unintentional, but it does become a habit over time. And this makes their self-esteem fluctuate according to these marks. So again, as I said earlier, if a student receives a high grade on an assignment, they may instantly feel fulfilled and satisfied from that. But let's say that they receive like a failing grade or just anything that's generally lower than what they usually get as a grade, then they may feel that they're not good enough or they're not smart enough, especially if this is used in combination with parental pressures. So if a student didn't meet their parents' expectations with that low grade, then that could cause their self-esteem and their mental health to decline even more. So I just wanted to briefly touch on the necessity of mental health awareness in schools after talking about all of these factors. So raising awareness for this matter introduces a lot of benefits on not just the individual, but community level as well. It empowers a lot of students to realize their worth and inner value, especially when it comes to their mental wellness and being able to balance these different aspects of their lifestyle. And after this is achieved on a personal level, then we can use these experiences to further propel the movement and democratizing resources and making sure that a lot of these services are accommodative and accessible to as many students as possible in schools. So this is just 3 reasons why having mental health awareness in schools is important. So for one, it increases and improves academic performance, especially if students are able to get the proper resources that they deserve and need. They'll feel more empowered to really just put their effort into their work. They may feel more confident in their performance, and they can also develop a lot of more beneficial and positive relationships with their teachers as well, which generally just fulfills that area of being able to sustain social relationships with mental health. And if they do develop that positive relationship with their teachers, then again, that can improve academic performance. And for the second reason here, I said that it does improve general outcomes in their life and decision making, because if they do have that increased realization and self-awareness, and they know how they can properly navigate it, they can start to really tap into their personal preferences and reach out whenever needed. They know how to seek the proper support system and implement that into their lives whenever possible. And 3, for my third reason, as I kind of implied in reason 2, it does generally lead to better management techniques and more self-awareness, because students will feel generally more empowered to get the help that they may need, or to really just validate their feelings and surround themselves with the support systems that they need. And if their schools validate mental health as an existing condition that they genuinely do want to provide services for, then that student will definitely feel more comfortable to even seek out help and voice out their concerns about their mental health. So again, a very connected issue. So this is really just about why it's important for us to take the initiative and bridge the gaps when it comes to mental health and education, and just generally in schools. So I said that one's school years, these are generally the formative stages for students. So again, while students are still in their early years, it's really important for them to know just appropriate values and mental health techniques that they can implement into their lifestyle. And it really just pushes the idea into them that it's good to incorporate healthy habits and routines as early as possible, so that it can again become a habit over time, and they know how to better manage themselves and their wellness. Schools are also an environment that students are constantly in. It takes up a significant amount of their day, and they are in school for a pretty extensive period of their lives. So because they are in this environment of constant exposure, they of course need to feel that their environment is safe and that they are unconditionally accepted. So they're not being discriminated against or being denied some of these resources for any reason. They will be accepted, and they will be given the proper resources and services that they need, regardless of the state of their mental health. So mental health in schools, and really just making sure that it is sufficient enough for students, is also good because it overlaps with social emotional learning. And this is really good. It's been a really big point of emphasis in today's education because it decreases antisocial behavior, and it definitely educates students to become more productive and empathetic towards others and to better regulate both their mental and emotional needs. They know how to communicate better and really develop those social relationships that they may need in any part of their lifestyle. And lastly, we have that it definitely increases their confidence and empowerment as well. As I kind of implied earlier, young folks will definitely feel more secure in themselves to recognize any concerns that they may have with themselves and be able to vocalize that to someone that can actually assist them when needed. They'll definitely be more empowered to take more initiative with making more positive decisions and being more cognizant of the impact that they have on others. So I wanted to also briefly touch upon the outcomes of declining student mental health. So I said that if it's not really approached properly in a school setting, again, because many students' time is occupied here and a lot of their routines come from school anyway, a lot of negative consequences can result from this. And as I also said earlier, mental health often aligns with the other sides of one's life. So that could be like emotionally, physically, socially. So it's really important to address these factors first because it can lead to improvement of a lot of different, like other different lifestyles and like routines down the line. So on the left over here, I just have a few outcomes. Of course, this isn't like the full list of outcomes that can result as a factor of like declining student mental health. So if one isn't really in like the right state to go to school, that may gradually lead to higher dropout rates because they feel like they're not really placing as much value in their academics anymore. They feel like they can't really exert the amount of performance that they would be doing if they were given the proper resources. It can also lead to decreased concentration and energy in the classroom, which obviously does lead to a lot of other negative and more serious consequences down the line. And it also results in just lower attendance and interest in school in general. So it's really important that we try to combat this matter as soon as possible so that we can obviously flip these outcomes and make sure that all students are given the resources that they need in order to fully succeed, not just in the school setting, but also in other aspects of their life. So I really just wanted to talk about school's shortcomings in mental health. So I found that there were a lot, not just from observation or my personal circumstances, but also in some of my peers. Like I also asked some of my friends as well on their observations on mental health services in schools and what they personally felt was lacking as well. So it was really interesting because it ranged from policy to educators' actions and intentions, as well as representation through these resources. And it involves so many stakeholders. So it is really crucial to include these stakeholders all in the discussion and the mental health movement because it really just helps for like accounting for different perspectives, the capacities that each one has, the different skill set that each one has, and the different needs that each one can properly approach. So for the first one here, I said that mental health days are not legalized in every state. I'm personally from New Jersey, and in NJ, we do not have legal excused mental health days. And I know a lot of my friends and peers would personally like to implement that because I think it really is a necessity and would be useful for so many students, especially when keeping up with their academics and realizing that they can have a balance with their personal and mental like wellness as well. So that is definitely something to push for, even if it is already legalized in other states. For the second one here, I said that there is still a lack of appropriate, accessible, and inclusive resources, and I can personally attest to that for my high school and the surrounding high schools in my area. We don't have too many mental health resources and services that are openly accessible, and even if my school actually does, they definitely do not do the most sufficient job in publicizing that and making sure that every student is aware that those resources are actually accessible in that school setting. So really just making sure that we can provide resources that are inclusive of many backgrounds and many values, that would just really make sure that all schools are like even like culturally responsive to these mental health needs of students as well. The third one here was a very interesting point because I have seen this in various articles, but a lot of students feel that the decisions and like the efforts that students or schools, sorry, are like currently making when it comes to offering mental health services, a lot of students say that some of the school's efforts might actually be seen as performative. They may feel that their school isn't actually taking like a genuine approach to making sure that they're fulfilling or just like meeting all of the mental health demands of their students. They may feel that it's just like something they can get out there to increase their image, or just something that can get out there because they just simply want to be like part of like other schools that are doing it as well, rather than actually having the right intentions of being there for their students and making sure that their needs are met. For the fourth one, I said that there is extensive, oh wait, it's supposed to say extensive like attention towards like mental health in a lot of students, but there is a lack of teacher training as well, which is, I'd say, pretty counterproductive, because a lot of teachers do recognize mental health issues in their students, but they can't really do much about it because it's more so they don't really have like the skills or the training to even know how to respond to it appropriately. So for the fifth one here, I said that there are still questionable evaluations and resource distribution. And again, I can also attest to that from personal experience in my school. So my high school actually did like pretty light evaluations on mental health in their students, and the quiz was like voluntary. So a lot of students didn't really feel comfortable enough to take it because they were kind of like fearful about its confidentiality. They didn't know how like the privacy worked around that, because they obviously didn't want that information about their mental health to even be disclosed to various people. They may not have wanted it to be disclosed to even their parents as well. And even when students did feel confident enough to fill it out, some of the students that actually reported mental health concerns weren't actually given the treatment or the resources or attention that they needed from the mental health professionals in my school. So I would say that this process is still pretty questionable. And for the sixth reason here, I have, again, a lot of concerns have arisen in high school students or just students in general about if the form is truly anonymous, you know, like, is it actually confidential? Is it actually private? And are only the appropriate contacts going to see it? Or is it going to be distributed to other people as well to look at? And this has become a really big issue because a lot of these evaluations are student specific. So again, some of their identity may be revealed in some way as they are filling out the form, but there is definitely a lot of space to further protect that student's privacy when they're filling it out. So for the seventh one here, we have that there are still some problems in properly granting accommodations. I know a lot of students have like an IEP or other plans that they may have in the classroom that does grant them these accommodations, but for other students without that plan, that may be a problem for them because it may be harder for them to get the accommodations that they truly need. For the eighth one here, I said that schools don't really address that stigma effectively. They may talk about it through a simple health class lesson, or they may simply just address mental health through like a short quote, which isn't really the most effective approach at all. But they're not really doing anything to even combat one of the root issues that comes with the mental health movement, which is stigma. So a lot of students aren't really enlightened too much about why mental health and the discussion is still being looked down on. Like, so a lot of education still needs to come there and really just leveraging the idea that like mental health and the should feel empowered to speak out whenever they're comfortable or whenever they can. So for the ninth one here, I said that there is still a lack of consideration, especially with teachers and admin, towards personal circumstances, especially when it comes to illness, family problems, and other factors that may be disrupting a student's lifestyle and can even disrupt their academic performance as well. I definitely feel that teachers need to be a lot more accommodative towards some of these situations that students may be going through. And it's also important to realize that a lot of students are, like, their backgrounds are drastically different from the next student. So again, even though a lot of these students are going through different situations, it's always good to empathize with them and make sure that we're truly understanding what they may be putting forward to us, rather than simply overlooking it as an issue or simply as an excuse, because a lot of the times it isn't simply just an excuse. It is a valid reason, like for their mental health as well. So for the 10th one here, I said that another shortcoming in school mental health is simply how mental health education is being administered. And I will talk about this in a future slide, but it really just comes down to how mental health content is being talked about, the duration of mental health education, how exactly they're communicating it, like how exactly that message around mental health is being delivered, you know, like are teachers seeing it as a truly crucial matter that they want to really deliver to students, or are they just doing it because it's part of the curriculum? So it's really important to realize that mental health education, it does like differ throughout state to state, but there are a lot of changes that can be made in general. So as for the notes that I put on the side, I did say that in schools, mental health doesn't really look like a primary focus for a lot of education as educators, sorry, and admin. I've noticed that like even in my school or my high school and the schools around here, a lot of admin, like they see it as like a thing to be indifferent about, and really just like a topic that they want to approach because other like schools are doing it, but not because they have like a genuine interest in actually helping their students. And a lot of schools should tailor their mental health plan and approaches differently depending on their student body, because of course each student body is made up of different like students, diverse backgrounds, very diverse perspectives and needs. So it's good to realize that, again, there is no one size fits all. We need to be responsive to the many backgrounds that our student body holds. So this is where I want to talk about mental health education approaches. So again, as I said, many states have differing policies and approaches to mental health in youth and their education systems. But despite these differences, I'd say that some universal matters can be discussed and implemented in some way to further rectify the issues around this. So these are just some of the main characteristics that I kind of wanted to point out about how mental health education could be made more effectively. And these are pretty education does state. So here, that this because I thought it was a really crucial observation that they made, but they definitely think that there should be a better balance between preventive and crisis-centered mental health education. I've definitely seen that in a lot of the schools around here, they do tend to only focus on crisis-related approaches rather than preventive mental health techniques and routines that students should be implementing into their lives. So because of that, we're kind of omitting like a very important part of mental health prevention and mental health as a movement in general. Students definitely need to know that there are techniques out there that they can use to just maintain their mental health, even if they don't have like a condition. Like mental health is not just characterized by the various conditions. It is also about maintaining your general wellness as well. So that is really important for students to realize. And for the second one here, I said that we should definitely readjust the curriculum to reflect today's mental health scene, whether that's by reflecting like recent like mental health policies, different techniques or like statistics that have been reflected in Generation Z and other aspects like that. And for the third one, I said that we should definitely emphasize the long-term benefits and outcomes. A lot of my peers have definitely noted that a lot of teachers just like offer like one practice and say that, oh, like it really just helps you like manage your wellness, but they don't really emphasize like the long-term outcomes of that, and they don't emphasize like the benefits that that could have, and really just like making that a habit for students. So definitely we need to shift like the significance, or we need to shift like the focus of like significance and how this is actually a pressing crucial matter that students can implement into their daily life just for entire lifespan. And on the side here, I have this source from the website. Hold on, let me go on to the previous slide if I can. have a resource over here that goes to the website Hopeful Futures, and I think it's a really good website because it has pages, 50 states, their progress with school policies and making policy, things like community partnerships, teacher trainings, statistics around student mental health, their approach towards the system in general, education around mental health, and like that. So if you're definitely interested in that, then you can feel free to check that out. But I put the link for New Jersey because that is where I'm from, but you can definitely feel free to look at that for other states as well. And it's really interesting to see how different states compare to each other. So as for the policy and governmental roles in mental health, so a lot of the points listed here are from the Hopeful Futures website because a lot of it is centered around the different policies around mental health that states have looked into. So I'd say that the government could definitely do a lot more with policies when it comes to things like, as it says here, funding for mental health resources and services in schools. And another topic that they're also mentioning a lot is a focus on Medicaid. So that they can cover the expenses for professionals like school psychologists and social workers. And the thing for these Medicaid plans, it shouldn't only include students with an IEP or other specialized plan. It should definitely be inclusive of as many students as possible, regardless of whether or not they have that IEP. And it should also include different mediums to deliver these resources and support. And a lot, one that has been really rising today is telehealth in schools. As for other policy-related factors, we should definitely encourage more young adults to enter the school mental health workforce, potentially through state incentives. So different community programs that states can set up in order to encourage more people to enter this workforce so that there could be a much better ratio of students to school mental health professionals. Schools can also definitely invest in more effective and comprehensive trainings for educators to respond to mental health in students, because as I said earlier, a lot of educators are actually aware of the fact that students nowadays do have many mental health like concerns and other factors that may be going on in their background as well, but they just can't really respond to it because they simply just don't know how to. They don't know what the most appropriate action would be to take in that case. So definitely, again, having those trainings and education in mind, not just for the educator, but the students themselves would be very beneficial in this case. Another role here that the government can make is having more optimal alternatives and solutions to mental health treatments in students. So as I said, having legal excused mental health days, because it's only offered in a select amount of states. Better disciplinary options to really just help to reduce that stigma around like student behavior, and updating the education and curriculum around mental health as well to better reflect Generation Z and the statistics nowadays. And lastly, even though this isn't a comprehensive list again, it would be good to incorporate more mental health check-ins for schools for all grades and students. And again, keeping in mind that being anonymous and like protecting one's privacy and confidentiality, those are all important factors to also have when crafting more accurate and more effective check-ins and evaluations. So here are the benefits of community partnerships. And this is, again, very broad because community partnerships include many different stakeholders, including students, parents, which I have an example of on the side here, educators themselves, administrators, the government, the organizations that may be spearheading these community partnerships, and much more. So community partnerships, so they really just help to integrate numerous backgrounds and expertise that can be used in the greater discussion around mental health. And the reason I say this is because having all of these different stakeholders means that there are obviously a lot of different perspectives and skill sets involved. And because of this diverse array, that just helps to fill in a lot of these blind spots that each position can provide. So for example, if we said that a student gave a suggestion at like a school meeting or something to have excused mental health days, obviously that wouldn't be possible without setting in place like different policies and having that role of like the admin and like other higher bodies as well. So again, their skill sets definitely align with each other. Community partnerships are also a mutual effort for the person contributing to that movement. So it can be a learning experience for the stakeholder themselves, and it can directly benefit the matter itself, which is the mental health movement. So for example, if we are talking about like a group of students that may be leading like an initiative to solve like a mental health issue in their community, then they're not only gaining the skills that they need for advocacy and to be able to communicate that to other people, but they're also directly benefiting the mental health movement itself. So lastly we have here is that there's more efficient resource distribution and more concrete like purpose that each stakeholder has. So because we're engaging the whole community through these partnerships, these organizations and other stakeholders must obviously know how exactly they have to use the resources and allocate it in a practical way to serve as many stakeholders as possible. So it really just prompts them to develop a lot of these strategies, like outreach techniques, you know, like the most effective approach as possible. They're doing it with as many audiences in mind as they're impacting. And that means that they really have to know how to sort out these different factors and be able to serve their mission as efficiently as possible. So again, as I said, there is a notable example on the side here, which is just that parents may attend school meetings and offer suggestions based on observations of how their young children best thrive. Parents also act as that medium to instill these values in comfortable manners to their children. So these are just some next steps for administrators that, again, a lot of my peers have noted as well. And I have seen a lot of these in like other articles and other sources as well. But the first one I have here is just to implement peer-to-peer programs. And I do think that this is important because a lot of young people do tend to identify best with people that they can actually like relate to. So I feel like there is definitely a higher sense of comfort and collaboration when it does come to peer-to-peer systems. As I said, community programs and partnerships are definitely beneficial because we are engaging the whole community, so there is a higher chance that more stakeholders will be involved. Excuse mental health days, although this isn't just the effort of administrators, it can definitely be brought up to higher bodies. And again, this would be really beneficial to have in all states and areas. Again, as I said, accurate and confidential student evaluations, because a lot of students nowadays in schools that do provide these evaluations and check-ins, a lot of students feel that they don't want to fill it out because they don't know where their data is being used. They don't want to be like exposed for any insights that they may be providing. They want to make sure that their data is protected and that their identity is safe as well. So I'd say that specifically for schools, as we have in the fifth one here, it's really good to gain student input, you know, just consult like the student body about any concerns that they may have, of course, with it being anonymous, and potentially form advisory boards that can really help aid administrators in any efforts that their school could personally look into and invest for their greater student body. And of course, we have here providing DEI or diversity, equity, and inclusion oriented resources. So I really just mean like making resources more accommodative, accessible, and definitely like more welcoming to students. We definitely need to make sure that it's known to students that they're able to access these resources whenever possible, and that it does benefit them in some way, regardless of their background or their current mental health state. We just need to make it more known that these services can be used by them no matter what. So definitely we can have students catalyzing this movement. And as I said here, as I said on the previous slide, it's definitely good to have like more peer-to-peer support, because there is this quote that I keep in mind, and it's that empathy is the highest form of knowledge. So just being able to empathize and understand the experiences of others is already beneficial in itself, especially when relating to others and building that sense of comfort, especially when it comes to mental health and supporting others' experiences. So students can definitely help by advocating for their peers, and that can take form in distributing various mental health resources, articles, infographics, and other resources that students may find useful. So it's not just limited to those. There are a lot of other interactive resources that students can really make the most of when it comes to managing their mental health. And also in the school setting, students can take part in arranging fairs, awareness events, fundraisers, and other different events that can definitely foster teamwork and innovation when communicating with the student body. And of course, that does help to inspire others and bring more comfort to the table. So students can also take part in this movement by having these different clubs and groups. So well-known mental health organizations such as Active Minds and Bring Change to Mind offer the option for students to expand their leadership skills and mental health advocacy by hosting these different clubs and events at their schools. And even though outreach is the main goal here, I'd say that other skills such as like collaboration and innovation as well are definitely other factors and other benefits that students can take from this experience. And it's also just good for them to find common voices that they can relate to and amplify even further. So a lot of students can take part in transparent discussions as well, because it does increase vulnerability and it can even empower other students to speak up. So again, as I said, it's very valuable in building a reliable support system, knowing that they can trust their peers, building comfort around other people that they can potentially work with. And in order to achieve this and have more open discussions, students can develop active listening techniques, respond accordingly to their fellow peers, and know what appropriate measures they can take in any situation. And again, as I said on the previous slide, input for administrators is definitely a good one as well, because I said that age doesn't really define experience or potential, because students can provide insights from their personal perspectives and backgrounds and even observations as well. And I think that that is sufficient enough to even get a conversation going and to definitely even raise awareness in the first place. So definitely speaking on trends and voicing out on these diverse preferences among the student body can enlighten administrators on the needs of students. So I also wanted to talk about neolth's use in educational settings and just schools in general. So neolth really just pushes that idea of creating products for students with the input and ideas of students, which again is such an advantage, because if we're crafting a product for a certain audience, then it's definitely good to even get like direct, like firsthand experiences and knowledge from those that like you're serving anyway. It's flexible for education since it can be used as a supplement for standard mental health curriculum and just like any awareness techniques that are already being used in schools. And teachers can always individualize their plans to their class and students as necessary. So on the side here, I just spoke briefly about the neolth app and the ambassador program and how they each promote like mental health education and awareness in various ways. So just briefly speaking on like neolth as the app itself, things like personalized features and just navigable like features as well, they're ideal for a wide range of preferences, since of course we are dealing with a very diverse audience here. And a variety of exercises can really help to ensure that as many preferences are acknowledged and met as possible for these users. And for the ambassador program, I said that it's open to students internationally. So this obviously does promote cross-cultural collaboration and exposure to different perspectives, which is so crucial in the mental health movement. It also offers like a diverse range of subcommittees that a lot of students can get involved in to express like their different interests and channel their interests in a way that like is beneficial for the movement itself and for themselves, since they're able to develop their skills. And it also just shows how inclusive and how all-encompassing the mental health field is. And again, it allows students to have that firsthand experience of mental health advocacy that they can also just implement into other advocacy movements that they take part in the future. So this is just a quick video of neolth being a trailblazer for mental health education in schools. So I'll play, I guess, part of it, since I believe this is the end of the event. And yeah, so I'll just briefly play this. All right, so that was the video that we had for neolth and how it supports young people. So that is the end of the presentation. So if you're definitely interested in working with neolth to further your mental health advocacy, or even just like advocate for mental health in school, since a lot of it intersects pretty well with educational settings anyway, definitely feel free to reach out and contact neolth about the student ambassador program and the internships, and definitely find ways that you can be involved in this discussion. So all of the contact info is listed here, and you can also sign up for neolth today and try the different features that the app has in order to maintain your wellness and find that balance for yourselves. So yeah, that's all for the event. Definitely feel free to reach out if you have any questions or concerns about anything as well, not just limited to the event. So yeah, that's all for today.